is that, look, the only thing, and you know that the only thing that you can do as a corporal, the most junior non-commissioned officer in the Marine Corps or in the Army, you know that the only thing you can do when Sergeant Major Walls walk by you is stand up and put your hands behind your back, and you know that. So you know all this stuff you're talking about. I'm not going to get into your job. I'm not going to get into what you did or didn't do or how many years you were in. What I will say, I appreciate your 4 years. But let me tell you something. What you need to do is you need to appreciate that senior non-commissioned officers 24 years plus of service. So with that, young man, that's all I have to say. You'll probably never see this, but if you do, then I have two words for you: at ease. Take it away, Rodney.
I love it. I love it. I love it.
Hey, Posse, welcome to the very first episode of Roundup with Rodney and Rodney.
I'm Rodney J. Littles.
And I'm Rodney Butler. Look, we are very, very pleased to have you here for our inaugural, our first episode of Roundup with Rodney and Rodney. We have a great guest on with us today that's going to enlighten you on on a topic that we know that you are very, very, very interested in. We also have our main man, Bobby Fryer, who is going to weekly or bi-weekly in this case, because it's a bi-weekly podcast. Bobby is going to be giving you some information from his politics corner. And then we're going to go into talking to our guests, and from there we're going to talk a little hot topics, and we're going to have one spotlight for you today. So without further ado, Rodney, what we got, man?
Wow. Well, let's welcome to our Black Man's Roundtable political contributor, Brother Bobby Fryer.
Hey, Bobby, can you see and hear us, brother? Always good to see you, man. Always good to see you. So Bobby, you're going to be doing this every couple of weeks for us. We looking forward to it, and I know you have some good information tonight from your politics corner. Hey, go whenever you're ready, brother.
I can hear you. Good to see everybody. Thank you for welcoming me in. Hey, appreciate it. Well, a lot has happened over the last time we have spoken. When we last let off, we were talking about Vice President Kamala Harris now being the front-running nominee for the Democratic Party in this fall's election. Since that time, she has made her selection for her vice president running mate, and that is Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. Since that time, prior to this, we talked about Donald Trump selecting J.D. Vance as his vice presidential nominee. Well, a lot has changed. The race has shifted dramatically. I don't get too deep into what the polls say, but what I will tell you is that there is a lot of momentum, a lot of enthusiasm that has percolated around Vice President Harris since she has become the nominee. She has secured enough delegates going into the convention next week to be the nominee. I attended her rally here in Atlanta last week. A lot of enthusiasm, a lot of diversity, men, women of all different backgrounds, a very large and diverse crowd, a very enthusiastic crowd with her presence here in Atlanta. And I know there was some controversy brought up about Megan Thee Stallion being there. My counter to that is they had Amber Rose at their Republican convention. So do with that what you will. It wasn't intended for an older audience. That was intended for the younger audience to show their engagement in her campaign. So
No,
Megan,
sir.
to her credit, she
No,
didn't say
Butler is.
anything, use any profanity. She didn't. She danced provocatively, but she had on clothes. Okay, she wasn't half naked out there. So do with that what you will. The bottom line is she has chosen her vice presidential nominee.
Yes, sir.
And I want to touch on something. And Rodney, you're a veteran. Myself, Mr. Littles, are you a veteran? I don't know if you are or not. Okay. I only bring this up for one reason. Rodney, you know this. Every veteran knows this. One thing you do not do as a veteran is try to clown another veteran's service. You don't point fingers at their, oh, they didn't do this, they don't do that. It's an unwritten rule. It's a no. You don't do that, especially publicly. You don't do that. And so JD Vance has done that to try to somehow shame Governor Walz's service of 24 years, of which after 20 you can retire. Okay, he served 24 in the National Guard. For him to try to make it seem like he cut and ran when his unit was deployed, it's shameful. It's shameful. It's not true, by the way. He filed his paperwork for his retirement months before the unit was activated to deploy, and they didn't deploy until the next year anyway. So for someone to bring that up from one fellow veteran to another, it's pretty despicable. It just shows you the type of campaign that they're running. It just shows you the desperation, and I find it comical now that I hear them. Their new strategy is, well, she hasn't done any interviews. She hasn't done any interviews. She needs to talk to the American people. All right. The funny thing about this is that they're acting as though she's not going to do one. She hasn't even been a nominee for a full month yet. Okay. And there's no need to do an interview until after the convention, after she's had the chance to lay out her policies and speak to the American people after the convention. What they want to do is get her in front of a microphone or get her in an interview and chop up something that she says, make a big deal out of nothing, or take something and run with it, because right now they're struggling to find something on her. So all they got is slanders, and all they got are these baseless claims, and I believe since the last time we spoke, the horrendous interview Donald Trump did at the NABJ has taken place, where he was actually questioning whether or not she was black or whether she was Indian. And I know where he's getting it from. He's getting it off the internet with some of us involved in that kind of self-hate against each other. But that's where it's coming from. But at the present time, she's riding a huge wave of momentum from different backgrounds, from different groups, important groups, unions that are supporting her campaign. And so the tone of the race has shifted. The polls seem to indicate as much in the battleground states, which is most important. I would just most likely like to see this be a definitive election as far as her winning. I just very much like to see that. But one thing everyone should be aware of is that if a man tried to cheat the last time, he's going to try it again. And what he's doing is he's trying to set up that platform to begin with. So what he's doing is he's already putting out there about them cheating, posting this nonsense about an AI image from her visit last week to Detroit. Oh, that's not real. Just a bunch of nonsense. He's trying to set the stage ahead of time to try to say, I was cheating. He's trying to set it up ahead of time where he hopes it'll go to the Supreme Court, and somehow that if she wins, they overturn the results. That's what he's trying to do. That's all he's got. He's so afraid of going to jail or going to prison and be held accountable, most importantly, for things that we believe that he's done, that there's evidence to support that he has done. But there's so much else, that they can talk about that they're not. They're not talking about the fact that he was on the log with Jeffrey Epstein's plane 7 times. He's on the air log 7 times with Jeffrey Epstein. They're now trying to, if you notice, they're now trying to run from Project 2025 and say Agenda 47 is it. If you look at it, it's the same thing. They're trying to be slick. It's the same stuff. I've seen his little 20 points that he put out there of what he plans to do. And a lot of that is lined up right with Project 2025, which he claims he knows nothing
Hey, Bobby,
about.
man, we out of here that we're going to talk about tonight. I had 2 hot topics, but I told Rodney I'm going to narrow it down to one. And what that one is this so-called stolen valor that JD Vance talked about. And I just want for that to be my one and only topic as a co-host tonight for our first show. I think that I couldn't ask for a better topic to talk about. As a multiple combat veteran myself. So So I appreciate the lead in on that. But also, I might have read it wrong, but I think that speaking of Jeff Epstein's airplane, I think I read somewhere where Donald Trump is actually using his that plane right now because his plane got some kind of fuel leak or something. So so this man is quite disgusting. But anyway, Bobby, thank you for that. Rodney, you have anything for Bobby before we let him get out of here, man?
Yeah, my brother, appreciate it. Bobby, man, you're always on point, man. I appreciate you. Not being a veteran myself, I was a little taken back about that also, but you put it in perspective for me. There's a code, and you follow that code, which tells me this man has no morals, no discipline, no character.
Absolutely. One final thing as I leave, one thing that the reason why it's a big no is that when you take the oath to serve, no matter what your position is in the military, whatever job you accept, you're always infantry. Okay, it doesn't matter if you're a cook. It doesn't matter if you're a pencil pusher. Bottom line is, if there's a war and we have to fight, everybody is considered infantry. So whatever your job is, you're expected to do it for the common good of the team. That's bottom line. So whether you serve 4 years, 8 years, 24 years, you volunteered. It's all volunteer military. You volunteered to take that oath to defend the nation against all enemies, foreign
Absolutely.
and domestic.
We've got a gentleman named Dontaye Carter. He's president of the Carter Media Group. Young man, father,
Thank you, brothers.
author,
Have a good night.
advocate,
Take care.
entrepreneur. I had the opportunity to meet him over the last several years in the vineyard, advocating for justice. And I couldn't have picked a better person to join us for tonight. I know you'll enjoy talking to him.
Well, absolutely. I'll tell you what, without further ado, let's bring him on.
Hey, fellas, what's going on?
Hey, Dontaye, can you see us? Can you hear us?
I can see you, I can hear you.
All right.
Hey man, we want to welcome you. Welcome you to the Roundup with Rodney and Rodney. And I think Rodney going to take it over from here.
Yes, sir. Very happy to have you on the Black Man's Roundtable, the Roundup with Rodney and Rodney. This is our inaugural show, and I couldn't have thought of a better person to have on. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're going to talk about tonight.
Rodney, I'm gonna jump into it for just a second, but I didn't know you had that J in there. Rodney J Little. So you're gonna have to tell us an example now. Put it out there.
James, my father's first name.
Love it.
Either that or a jack of all trades, because Rodney know everything.
But Rodney, if you good with it, man, I'd like us to have a candid conversation about some of the things you and I talk about a lot. How we talk about politics, black men. It's interesting in our community. We're the only group where they separate genders. You never hear them talk about how white men vote compared to white women, how Hispanic men vote compared to Hispanic women, how Asian men vote compared to Asian women. But they'll talk all day, and they do it at such a volume, and they make people feel so comfortable about it. There are folks outside the community want to come over and say, "What's going on with black men?" And you like, hold on now, did you talk to Charlie about why he's still voting for Trump? Like, what is going on here? And this misconception that black folks are monolith, as though we don't have an opportunity to think different. A lot of folks were frustrated about NABJ, and I'm probably gonna say something that's gonna make folks feel uncomfortable, but I appreciated what the NABJ did because they invited both candidates. Only one candidate showed up. We understand that VP Harris is extremely busy, but at what point do we get to start holding debates, especially when we were locked out? Black media was locked out of the original debate with Biden and Trump. And so, I just what I'm enjoying this black male revolution that I'm seeing in terms of us really, voicing our concerns, because it is interesting. In 2020, I didn't see a black women's movement. I didn't see just a black male movement. I saw a black families movement. Most black men that I know are concerned about their families, are concerned about the state of their community. Most of us, we don't get credit for it, but we're mentors. We're taking care of kids that aren't ours, but they're in our community. And so the fact that we don't get credit for these things, and we have folks coming up as though they understand how we think and how we function, and they haven't been through what we've been through as a community in this country is interesting. And I think that this is one of those conversations that I think we got to have because um, as black men, I think it's okay to say, I don't think we see it the same way you do, because every other group gets to. I understand fighting for justice. I understand that times we're put in positions where we have to pick the lesser two evils, but I do think it's okay um, within that realm to have an opinion and at times criticize as well.
Gotcha. Appreciate that. Appreciate that. I've had an opportunity to watch you uh, in the community and on the battlefield. One of the concerns I had in 2016 was the influence of outsiders using social media to discourage black men from voting. And now we see a lot of advertising from political candidates that's just not true
Mm-hmm.
about their opponent. Can you, as a professional in the media sector, can you talk a little bit about what you see and how you think that's impacting the black male vote?
Well, I think the playbook that's being run against black men has been the playbook that's being run. It's been run since the beginning. 1492 before they even brought us over here. I think that where we are is we're at this. What I appreciate about the internet is it's allowing us to have conversations like we're having right now, to peel back some of these layers of misinformation that have been on us for a long time. And so um, I think that they're gonna run that same playbook. I think Donald Trump's gonna go in here and talk about how his criminal justice reform act that he signed as president freed more black people since Abraham Lincoln. We're gonna hear all that. The reality is nobody freed more people or fought for more people outside of Attorney Fred Gray and Attorney Thurgood Marshall, and we're familiar with the work that they did during the civil rights movement. And so I think it's going to be incumbent on us as black men to be a little more visible about what we do. Right? We've been doing these things from the beginning, but the internet gives us an opportunity to talk. So let's talk about the conversations that we're having in the barbershop. Let's talk about the conversations we're having with black men at work. Let's talk about the conversations we're having with other black fathers at sporting events, because we've already been doing those things. Let's have a much broader conversation, because the more that we have this conversation, the more it washes out all this other stuff. Because the reality is black men want to engage in politics. They've engaged in politics. The frustration that I'm hearing, especially from a lot of my peers, is that they feel as though they're being left behind, and they said, how are we going to move the family forward when we're leaving the man behind? And that's a real legitimate argument. We got to be able to listen to those concerns and understand that no other group in this country, again, has gone through what black Americans have gone through. Nobody has dealt with the burden, and no other group is dealing with outside forces continuing to pit genders against one another. And it's bananas to me, because I'm married to a black woman. These conversations that I hear in the public space about what black men are doing and what black women are doing don't actually take place in my household. And we're working to raise a black daughter. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I think we've got to just be more vocal about what it looks like. Because the reality is over 75% of black men are still marrying black women, right? Over 70% of them are remain in the households with their kids. So this whole narrative about, oh, deadbeat dads, I mean, it's not true. And the fact that y'all keep singling in only 2% of our population, when y'all don't do that with any other group of people, we got to start calling a spade a spade. I think that, again, that's where we got to really dive deep and have these conversations in public, because it's not until we speak up that we start to silence these. And I don't even want to say they're critics. They're not critics. They're puppets of misinformation.
Yeah, I got you.
Rodney, if I can squeeze in here a little
I was
bit,
going to ask you, did you have a question, Rodney?
absolutely. Well, I have more of a comment on some things that a couple of things that Dontaye said, and so Dontaye, a lot of the loyal followers of the Black Man's Roundtable series now know that the primary reason for me starting this podcast was to bring Black men out of the shadows, especially the political shadows, right? And get back involved, as well as our youth, no matter what their gender or race, which we all know here is a made up construct. We didn't make it up, but but we have to use it. That being said, I think you said that there's kind of a black male kind of revolution kind of thing going on. Brother, I feel it too. I absolutely feel it. If we were as useless as the main culture would want you to believe, then they just wouldn't spend so much time and energy trying to denigrate us and trying to make us out to be something that we're not. I talk about a lot, Dontaye, as you become a member of this Black Man's Roundtable family. I talk about a lot as a former educator that one of the things that people ask me, well, what do you remember the most about being, in your years as an educator, and or what stuck to you? What was one thing you'll never forget? And Rodney know what I'm about to say. And what it is that, when I voluntarily taught in Atlanta public schools, Southwest Atlanta, okay, in the hood, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I talk a lot about how those young fathers, it was elementary school, so most of the parents are very young, I talked to older elementary kids, the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, but the parents were still young because you got kindergarten and all kind of young kids out there. And I talked a lot of, I tell people what I remember the most is those young men. Okay, they may not have the nuclear family, they may not be married to the mother of their child or children, but I would watch every single day. I would watch these young men, pants halfway down, the whole 9 yards, but how gentle they were with their children. So it's been proven time and time again with different kinds of surveys and different things. So this information that I'm about to say is not just anecdotal, which is that Black men in America, African American men, actually spend more time, quality time with their children than any other subgroup of men in America. So it is what it is. So I'm glad you brought it up, brother. I appreciate you, explaining that and talking about it.
Yeah. Rodney mentioned that I'm an author. That was part of the reason why I wrote this book. You know what I'm saying? With me and my daughter, because I told my wife, I said, this is something I got to do because this whole erasure of us is not something that me being in the media space is just going to sit by and allow to happen. Now, again, CNN's running, ABC is running. They've all said Black men are the most engaged group of men in the United States of America. So what are we talking about again? You know what I'm saying? Like, what are we talking about? And so I think the conversation has to shift between I'm perfectly fine. My wife, she's a business owner. She's an OBGYN, runs her practice. They're a minority majority group of women running their practice. And it's amazing to see my daughter is impacted by it greatly. But again, if we're talking about the nucleus of Black family, Black men have to be at the table. We have to be a part of this conversation because here's what I know. When I took that African ancestry test and it told me that prior to the transatlantic slave trade, my family was living over in Portugal, my ancestors, and my family went over there. We went to the Moors ruins. You know what I'm saying? We saw the castles. We saw these things. My daughter, she was 5 at the time. I mean, if you could have seen just how much her head was on a swivel, and I say swivel because she couldn't believe that not only did Black people build these castles, but they were living in them. And so for y'all to tell us that we're not who we are, No, I want to compare myself to what we've done in history, what we've been there. Because here's what I know: when when the late great Congressman John Lewis and dozens of others were beat down trying to cross the Edmund Pettus Bridge, they were going over there by Montgomery County. And Montgomery County is one of the largest plantations in Alabama. That's where my family, on my father's side, a majority of them still over in that area. They were there. They were trying to register these folks to vote. They're a majority of the county, and they don't even have a right to vote. And that's what they were over there doing. And so to see black men who've been on the front lines, because we got to be honest, the folks who've taken bullets in this movement have overwhelmingly been black men. The ones whose blood has been spilled, standing up, saying that the most persecuted person in America is a black woman. That man took bullets for this movement. Dr. King took bullets for this movement. And no other group do they allow anybody to smear their martyrs. And we got to stop that as well. And just being open and clear, because when I see these men, when I see Booker T. Washington, when I see Dr. King, when I see Malcolm X, when I see Attorney Fred Gray, when I see Thurgood Marshall, there's pride there, you know. And so I just think we got to remind these folks of what this is, because this isn't a black man versus black woman. This is about a black community that, and I mean, remember, we're still living in a country where every other group that did not go through what we did through, but was oppressed in some way, receive reparations. We're the only group where there was not a repairing made. And so, you know, I get a little sensitive when we start talking about these issues and we start trying to blame black men for an issue that is so much bigger, yet they're still showing up, they're still engaged. And I think we got to applaud them for that.
Yes, sir. I tell you, man, you hit it on the head. I mean, you hit the nail straight on the head. And so there's one thing I often say this as well, Dontaye. I talk about how I believe that we, as African Americans, we are the most savvy political minds in the world. We are the most savvy voters in the world. And people say, well, why do you say that? Do you know everybody in the world? No, I don't. But here's what I do know. I know that we had to, when we vote, we literally vote for our lives and for our freedom every single time. So we're not some casual voter. We really don't care about political parties, the D or the R. You know, it right now it appears that, you know, a lot of our values and what we care about the most lined up with the Democratic Party for many black people. But once upon a time that it lined up with with Republicans.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't really care about, you know, a red jersey or a blue jersey. What we care about is not being in chains. And so what I often say, again, that we are the most savvy voters because we have to literally vote for our lives every single time. We have so many laws that were so-called, you know, made to protect us that nobody is interested in codifying those laws to make sure that they stay in place. You know what I'm saying? So, and I don't care if you're a D or a R, you're just not. Yeah. You're just not, because it's not going to affect you the way that it affects us. So we are very, very savvy when it comes down to voting. And also, there's nobody that's, look, people are saying a heartbeat. I'm sure you've heard it, Dontaye. Well, slavery been around forever. Slavery been around, you know, every country had enslaved people. And you are absolutely right. Slavery been around since forever, since man been around almost. However, I remind people that chattel slavery is unique to the Americas, and especially the United States of America. It is unique. It's the only place where it's the only slavery where you're born into it. Simply by the hue of your skin, you are born into slavery and you can never get out of it. No other country, you know, so they say, well, you know, they sold some of the African, they sold your people into slavery. Well, their idea of slavery was that they could work themselves out of it. They didn't know about chattel slavery. If they had, I think things would have been different. So yeah, we are ones to be reckoned with. And like you said, man, since the early 1600s, to go from chattel slavery to an African American man being a president in 400 years of again chattel slavery. You were never supposed to become a citizen. Look, what people know is that we are something around the world. People know that African Americans are a people to be reckoned with. There are people who have been in slavery in other countries. It took them 3,000 years to get out of slavery, and really they're kind of still in slavery in some of these countries. And they look at us like, wow, chattel slavery, 400 years. They're out of it. And the last thing I want to say about what you were saying, Dontaye, is this, about that segment you were saying, is that, you know what? You can burn all the books you want. You can take all the curriculum out of the schools or whatever. But listen, there's one thing that made a lot of non-melanated men in this country very, very rich, that was created by a black man. Well, the cell phone kind of, but was the internet, right? So guess what? You can't pull back the internet. So you can look, the gig is over. And this is why this revolution, this black man revolution that you're feeling, I'm feeling, that Rodney's feeling, because the gig is over. I just believe the gig is over.
Yeah. And it's exciting because, to see black men, regardless of where they fall on the age spectrum, saying, no, y'all done gone too far. We got to put our foot down. We love our kids. We're standing up. Because it's a lot. Going back to the point you made, you'll never hear them talk about Russia and Ukraine as Europeans dealing with Europeans. Oh, they get very specific about the groups, but they'll come over here and say, well, what about when Africans sold Africans? Well, let's be specific. Same way we know Florida residents are different from Georgia residents. Understand that there are multiple groups of people. We all get that. And so I think that seeing this black male revolution is taking place, I'm excited about it because it's needed. And not only is it needed, but our families need us to have it. They need us being in the roles and positions that God put us in, to help steer this. And so I appreciate what y'all are doing. I appreciate this roundtable because I do think there are discussions that black men gotta have. We've got places where every other group is able to kind of walk in the true essence of who they are, and we need spaces where we can walk in the essence of who we are, without being reminded of slavery, without being reminded of incarceration rates, without being reminded of how we're doing academically. No, because what I do know is, if you taught history in global context, not starting in 1776, but starting further back, you would see black students perform better. But if you isolate who they're able to see as leaders, or you minimize Black History Month to Dr. King, you know what I'm saying, in the Malcolm X conversation, when they're warriors that came before them, we just got to be clear and ensuring that our children can have that pride of understanding, slavery happened to us, but that's not who we are. And that's not the only thing that we've ever been.
So we were enslaved is what the issue was.
Yeah.
That I try to describe to my grandchildren when we talk about that. Dontaye,
Sir.
before we let you go.
Well, right before we let him out of here, I do want to say this is because he talked about, I like the way that Dontaye talked about, the black man and the black woman. There's been, I believe, probably at least for the last 15, 20 years, there's been like by design, a divide to divide and conquer. I believe that it actually, worked to a great extent. I had never seen, black men and black women so divided, in my life, in my lifetime. But I say that to say that I'm just glad, and I'm glad that we have platforms like this that reminds us, because sometimes we can start to get a little have the negative vibe about things, but when you hear other men, other people feeling the same thing you feeling, is it very reassuring. And I say that to say this, Dante, is I haven't watched CNN in forever, right? And because the mainstream media, most of that stuff is just propaganda. That's why they want Kamala Harris to have an interview right now, knowing the lady only been the Democratic nominee for, I don't know, a couple of weeks, and you expect for her, you're trying to set up for failure. But they want the S show. They want that very, very bad. So and she's not giving it to them, and I'm glad she's not, because that lets you know who's winning. But I was watching CNN, and I decided to watch I forget the sister's name, but anyway, she got a show on CNN, and it comes on in the evening, and I watched it yesterday. And again, I hadn't watched CNN forever. But anyway, she had this brother. I got it right here. She had this brother on. His name is L.Z. Granderson, and he is a professor at the Western Michigan University. And they had this guy on who would not let this sister talk. Would not. I mean, she could get a word in edgewise. It was a round table kind of thing where you had the panel, had a whole panel on there. And I believe he's of Middle Eastern descent. I could be wrong. I forget his name, but the lady name was Tara Setmeyer. I know who she is. She was a communications director or something for the Republican Party back in the day. But like so many other, Black Republicans, she's kind of moved to more towards the center or more towards Democrats. And this guy was just the way he was talking about Kamala Harris. It was very tongue in cheek, just basically saying that she's not smart and all this stuff. But I gotta tell you, that brother LZ, what is his name? LZ. Let me make sure I get it right here. LZ Granderson. The way that brother protected that sister on that panel yesterday, man, it made me feel absolutely great. I said, this is what I'm talking about right here. This is the way it used to be. I mean, he literally said, I'm emotional right now. And he just went, so in a very good way, he really let this guy have it. And so, and I think that's one of the things that those sisters, with the NABJ, I think that they should have had a brother up there, and I promise you, Donald Trump may have moved differently. So we need to get back together on that. And I just want to say that, man, before we let you go. And obviously, Rodney, we can close out the guest. Dante, I appreciate you, brother.
Now, I appreciate you, but I was talking to, and I'm not gonna name them, but I was talking to some fellas from CNN, and that was their biggest disappointment. They're Black men, and they said they don't understand why they put those sisters up there like that by themselves with no cover. And that's the reality of it. Because and I want to say this too, I appreciate your service. Both my parents were in the military. And
Thank you, brother.
Talking to my dad, and one of the things that he told me, and just even hearing the pain in his voice as he talked about it, was he said, man, do you understand what it's like when you go to fight for this country? You in some battles, you don't know how you're going to get it home. You made a promise to these wives, to these mothers, to these sisters that you're going to get their babies back. He said, I never lost a man out there. And he went on to say, but then we come back here and we got to deal with all this other stuff. When we gave up, the blood, the sweat, the tears, everything was poured into this. And we gotta, and that's why I appreciate this revolution. I appreciate this platform, because brothers gotta have a place to come home, and these platforms are gonna be home for us. You mentioned that it's good to hear that other men are going through and experiencing the same things that you are going through and experiencing, and there's so many others that we got to touch and let them know, hey, we are all in this together, and that's how that movement continues to flourish.
Again, appreciate you, brother. And you know what we say when somebody come visit our house. I'm gonna tell you, Dontaye, right now. You at home. You at home.
Definitely coming back. But before you go, tell us how folks can reach you and what kind of services your company provides.
Yeah, so you can reach me. I've got a website. On the brand side is it's DontayeCarter.com. It's DONTAYE Carter CARTR.com. And then on my company side, we've got CarterMedia.net. And so we work with a lot of attorneys, politicians, with branding, messaging, really working to tell the story. And it just so happens that the majority of my clients are black men who are really fighting to tell their stories in these spaces where they feel like they've been washed out of, and it's a niche that we kind of found through trial and error in the business space, but it's a niche that I'm glad that I'm in, because the more and more that I work with these different men, the more and more I'm finding myself in it, which is bananas in and of itself.
Very good. And can you tell us where we can get your book, the title?
Man, we on every platform. Target, we at Walmart.
Let me see the book.
So we got them in hard copy here. It's My Daddy and Me. Also have them in paperback. Amazon actually has a sale going on for the book, so we're doing pretty good on Amazon. So I appreciate Amazon. But you know what I wanted folks to see is, black men love. We love deeply, and I love all the black men writing books, especially when it comes to us and our daughters, because this is a side of us that they don't want the world to see, that they're working to erase. And this is a side of us that we're going to fight to make apparent. So I'm just, I appreciate you guys really highlighting the book, and, I appreciate those who've come out and support it. But, for me, this is what it's about. It's about ensuring that, our sons can see themselves. What broke I don't want to say broke my heart. What warmed my heart is, I do a lot of mentoring at my daughter's school. She's 6 now. And we had some of the 10-year-olds. And man, to see these jokers go from talking about the HOEs, right? To, man, you married, you got this, you and your wife working, and you can see their wheels are turning, right? Because it's so much trash that's being fed to them. But when they see it, and they see it done right, it changes their world. And so just being able to see that and knowing that these things are having an impact, it means the world to me. So I appreciate you all opening up your platform and giving me a chance to really talk about these things.
Thank you.
Dontaye, again, man, we appreciate you. You're not going to be a stranger. Like I said, you're at home. When you come on here, man, like I said, it is family. So again, man, we appreciate you. Make sure Rodney get that information for those books.
I will do.
All right, now. God bless you.
All right, Rodney. Man, you can't beat having a guest for your our first guest to be like that, man. So I definitely appreciate your work in getting Dontaye with us, and I know that this brother is not going to be a stranger, so we appreciate that. All right, Rodney, what we got next? We got the hot topics, and I have the hot topic for tonight. Usually we both have one. But we know that this is going to run a little long, and we know that that we have a video coming up for our for our spotlight, for our whole spotlight that you're going to be sharing. So I'll just do the hot topic tonight, and like I let everybody know already, I had a couple of hot topics set up for this first one, but because of Corporal J.D. Vance and the words that he had to say to Tim Walz, I was trying to figure, should I call him governor, or should I say sergeant major or first sergeant or whatever he was. That's why. Or coach, but since I'm going to be talking about the military thing, then this whole, just like Bobby talked about, our contributor who joins us each and every other week for our politics corner, talked about, it's a serious thing to for another military member to talk about another service member's valor or lack thereof or whatever. Well, um, most of you know who follow the Black Man's Roundtable series that we're now doing. I am a veteran. I'm a proud veteran. I retired from the United States Army with more than 20 years of service. And the bottom line, and I'm also a multiple combat veteran, multiple. So I hope that every veteran who has any type of platform, whether it's small like this or whether it's as large as whoever got these mega platforms, I hope that every veteran, especially combat veteran, come out and say something against this so-called stolen valor that JD Vance, Corporal JD Vance, want to accuse of Governor Tim Walz, who may not have. I'm not going to get into all the intricacies as to. I'm not going to bore you with a bunch of military stuff as to how you can achieve one rank but retire another rank. That's all semantics. I'm not going to get off into all of that. But either way, this man retired, as a senior non-commissioned officer in the United States National, the Minnesota National Guard, and which is a part of the United States Army. Which I want to say right off the bat is that there are three components of the United States Army. You have the National Guard, which is what he's a part of, commonly known as citizen soldiers. You also have the Army National Guard. The Army Reserves, which is, like it says, it's the reserve of the third component of the United States Army, which is the regular Army. People usually say active duty Army, right? But anybody can be. You're active based on orders that make you active. So a National Guardsman can be active, and a reservist can be active. But it's actually the regular Army, RA. And so I say that to say this: National Guardsmen, citizens, better known as citizen soldiers, they were not designed to fight foreign wars in the first place. Okay. Now I'm not trying to say that, well, if you're National Guard, you shouldn't be fighting foreign wars. I'm not saying that, but that is not what they were designed to do. I remember my first, time going to combat, which was way back in Desert Storm. Okay. I was 19, 20 years old, somewhere around there. And the bottom line is that I remember a bunch of men. I was in combat arms, so it was all guys. There was no women around. Women couldn't be in combat arms back in those days. Yes. And so, and I remember a bunch of the older, we say older in the military, but you're still kind of young, but you're like 37. That's kind of 33 is old in the military, at least in the regular Army. In the regular services, it's considered old. But I remember those guys just retiring. And before we actually, got deployed, to or putting in retirement paperwork and that kind of stuff. I didn't think nothing of it one way or the other. And keep in mind, they had been in a situation where they had probably been in the Army since, the late 60s, when the Vietnam War was, dying down, or the early 70s. And so all they mainly knew was peacetime and training for war, but they had not necessarily been to war. So we know right around the time when Desert Storm kicked off, I was in what's called a wartime Army. The whole entire 21 years, we were training for war and going to war. So I didn't really know the peacetime situation. But I'm gonna tell you something. These guys were retiring. They made a conscious decision. They were over 20 years. Okay, which gives you the privilege to retire whenever you want to. After 20 years, now they have to you have to get permission to retire, but that's a whole nother story. But with that being said, these were guys in my unit who were not National Guardsmen and decided to retire. These were 82nd Airborne Division paratroopers. We jumped out of planes for a living. That's what we did. Okay. And so these were not National Guardsmen, and some of them decided to retire that had more than 20 years. So I just want to say to Corporal JD Vance is that, look, the only thing that you can do as a corporal, the most junior non-commissioned officer in the Marine Corps or in the Army, that the only thing you can do when Sergeant Major walls walk by you is stand up and put your hands behind your back, and you know that. So, all this stuff you're talking about, I'm not going to get into your job. I'm not going to get into what you did or didn't do or how many years you were in. What I will say, I appreciate your 4 years. But let me tell you something. What you need to do is you need to appreciate that senior non-commissioned officers 24 years plus of service. So with that, young man, that's all I have to say. You'll probably never see this. But if you do, then I have 2 words for you. At ease. Take it away, Rodney.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Wow, that was definitely a hot topic, my friend.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, so host spotlight. I ran across a video that was produced by the Wall Street Journal, piggybacking on what we've been talking about earlier from time to time during this show and others about the Heritage Foundation's policy research and development for laws that have been instituted around the country at the state level, taking away individuals' rights, promoting conservative policies that are not in the norm of what I grew up understanding America was supposed to be about. Well, the Heritage Foundation, with the help of former President Trump's staff members, campaign staff members, have come up with what's called Project 2025, or as Brother Fryer said earlier, they coded it into Agenda 47, and the last iteration is the first 180 days. So I'd love to share that with the audience as we get into specifics before the election at upcoming shows on this whole issue of Project 2025.
Thank you, Rodney. And I think we have a video, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, we're going to run that video. And what I would tell you is this. What I want the audience to know, what I want the posse. That's what we call you guys. We call you guys the posse. And that comes from Mr. Littles, okay?
Posse.
The Roundup posse. I was gonna say, hey, cowboys and cowgirls. Rodney said, hey, you know what? Let's do posse. I said, let's do it. And so anyway, look, posse, I tell you, we are going to be that was an overview for the Project 2025, but all the way up until the election, myself and Rodney, we're going to break down what the most important aspects, because we don't have much time. We only do 2 shows a month, but we're going to break down the aspects of Project 2025. We have 10 of them, but we can't cover them all, that we believe that affects our community the most, and we're going to talk about those individually. So don't worry if you didn't understand everything that was in the video, or that it didn't quite hit right, because just like our flyer says, we're going to break it down. You're going to hear it from 2 real ones. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So with that, Rodney, we're going to go ahead on and close out this first episode, man. I think it's going to get better as we continue to get better. This thing is going to flow. We'll be doing it in our sleep, man. And I can't wait for us to get to that point, but I know it's going to happen, and I can't wait for it to happen. So with that, we appreciate you, posse. We appreciate you. We'll see you in about 2 more weeks, because without you, there is no us, and we'll keep rounding them up.
Thank you, sir. To join the Unbought and Unbossed posse, until next time.
Peace.
This 920-page document would usher in the most conservative executive branch in modern American history, if enacted. It's called Project 2025. Its pages offer new administrations a blueprint for executing a right-wing agenda, from purging the government of thousands of civil servants to dismantling the Department of Education.
We do have to initiate the largest mass deportation project in the history of this country.
Former President Donald Trump has distanced himself from Project 2025, but Democrats aren't buying it.
Project 2025 would roll back our fundamental freedoms, undermine our democracy, and gut checks and balances.
Here's a closer look at the 4 main pillars of this radical plan and how they could transform the American government as we know it.
One of the things that's interesting about Project 2025 is the tone. You hear the term woke mentioned dozens of times, radical mentioned dozens of times. It's remarkably driven by culture war politics.
Project 2025 is designed as a government in waiting if Trump or any conservative president returns to office. It's the brainchild of the Heritage Foundation, a conservative think tank and lobbying group that has helped staff Republican administrations since the Reagan era.
We cover literally every public policy issue in Project 2025, from domestic policy to foreign policy.
Kevin Roberts is the president of the Heritage Foundation and one of the driving forces behind the project.
All Project 2025 is trying to do is to be a corrective to the liberal nonsense that has been so insidious inside the executive branch for the last half century.
The Heritage Foundation says Project 2025 is backed by more than 100 conservative organizations and a $22 million budget.
So I think the size, scale, and sophistication of Project 2025 is unprecedented.
The project has 4 main pillars: a policy plan, a personnel database, an online academy, and a playbook for the president's first 180 days in office.
We can be ready to hit the ground running on day 1 of the next administration.
The first pillar is a policy agenda that focuses on dismantling the so-called administrative state, or what some conservatives call the deep state.
Either the deep state destroys America, or we destroy the deep state.
For Project 2025, dismantling the administrative state means purging the civil workforce of tens of thousands of federal employees and replacing them with conservative, pre-vetted picks.
There is a concentration not just of power, but a concentration of radical leftist ideology in these employees. Hopefully, we will see over the next 10 to 20 years the elimination of entire cabinet departments.
The plan would dismantle the Department of Homeland Security, eliminate the Department of Education entirely, and transform the FBI into a political task force that is accountable to the president.
But the leadership of the FBI has been awful and rotten and not transparent for a long time. It is very important that Congress reestablish its purview over the FBI generally, its jurisdiction.
To give a sense of how radical this is, the FBI is an organization that has never been run by a Democrat. And so this is an organization that in its bones is a fairly conservative organization, and where now you have right-wing voices saying that it should be eliminated.
The playbook also outlines a plan to bring many federal agencies, like the Department of Justice, under more direct presidential control.
What Project 2025 articulates is the idea that the president should be the one directing the activities of the Department of Justice, even if that means that the president will not be investigated or that the DOJ will be sent to attack the president's political enemies.
We will root out the communists, Marxists, fascists, and the radical left thugs that live like vermin within the confines of our country.
The Heritage Foundation says it wants to ensure that what remains of this whittled-down federal bureaucracy is conservative, not just for the next president, but for a long time to come. Pillar 2, personnel database. The Heritage Foundation has already contracted the technology company Oracle to build this database, kind of like a conservative networking platform.
We've recruited Americans all over the country, and so we've had well over 11,000 people who've applied to be considered by the next president and his administration.
Trump really emphasizes loyalty, and you see those practices now being adopted by Project 2025, where you fill out a form that essentially indicates if you are loyal to President Trump or not.
Once they're fully vetted, they can move on to Pillar 3, an online presidential administration academy that would train future bureaucrats in conservative values and governing.
So we want these people who are competent, who have great credentials, to be prepared for the specific job that they will have.
Project 2025 provides detailed policy plans for dozens of government agencies, outlining ways to create de facto abortion bans, slash federal investment in renewable energy, and roll back environmental regulations. Here, you can see several sections dedicated to consolidating U.S. immigration agencies and expanding their power.
Number one, we have to close the border. We do have to initiate the largest mass deportation project in the history of this country. The 12 million people who've come in as illegal aliens, must be sent back to their native countries.
But how legally sound are these policy proposals, and what would they look like in practice? That's where Pillar 4 comes in, the playbook for the first 180 days of a conservative presidency. A big part of the plan is modeled off of a Trump-era policy called Schedule F.
Schedule F is originally an executive order that Trump signed that would allow him to turn thousands of career civil servants into political appointees that he could then fire if they displeased him in any way, and then have to be more responsive to a president who in the past has shown a willingness to fire people for disloyalty rather than for competence.
The Biden administration reversed this order in 2021, but Trump has vowed to bring it back if he is reelected.
First, I will immediately reissue my 2020 executive order restoring the president's authority to remove rogue bureaucrats, and I will wield that power very aggressively.
I think Schedule F is not just possible, but it's certainly an incredible priority of a second Trump administration. The problem with Schedule F is that there is no real limitation to the number of people who could be converted.
Underpinning many of Project 2025's policy proposals is a legal principle called the unitary executive theory. It is based on a clause in the Constitution that says the executive power is vested in the president.
Project 2025 assumption is that the president has something called unitary executive authority. This gives him enormous untested powers to essentially do whatever he wants and reduces the power of Congress to check those powers.
Conservative Supreme Court justices, like Justice Samuel Alito, have signaled support for the unitary executive theory and skepticism of federal agencies.
The current Supreme Court has shown itself to be very open to claims that the president has enormous executive authority and so should be able to hire and fire people at will.
In July, the Supreme Court granted presidents immunity for any official acts taken while in office. Legal experts say this decision could set the stage for expanding presidential power.
Trump would be looking at a Supreme Court that would be quite sympathetic to his claims that he has extraordinary executive powers, far more than previous presidents, and would allow him to do things that previous Supreme Courts would have checked with other presidents.
Other legal scholars say the unitary executive theory and some of Project 2025's more radical proposals simply aren't realistic.
It will inevitably draw dozens of lawsuits if all of its policies are implemented. So you cannot eliminate an agency without Congress agreeing to that. Congress has the power to create agencies and to eliminate agencies unless the Supreme Court suddenly grants new power to the president.
Project 2025 has garnered increased attention on social media.
Project 2025.
Project 2025.
Project 2025.
As Democrats shine a spotlight on its sweeping proposals.
Project 2025 will destroy America. Look it up.
This agenda is a fascist, authoritarian dictator's dream. And we know that that is exactly who Donald Trump wants to be.
Democratic Congressman Dan Goldman is part of the Stop Project 2025 task force.
So what we are trying to do is make sure that every American who is going to go to the ballot box on November 5th knows exactly what they will get if Donald Trump wins.
More recently, Trump made moves to distance himself from Project 2025. In a Truth Social post, he said he knew nothing about it, calling some of the proposals ridiculous and abysmal. Goldman says these statements are part of a larger political strategy.
So many of his former top officials are at the head of Project 2025. It is a political calculation that he's making because he recognizes that the American people do not support this extremist agenda.
President Trump is trying to win a presidential campaign, and we understand that he has to make political considerations. Given the millions of dollars that the left has spent attacking Project 2025 because they have nothing else to run on, I wasn't surprised to see President Trump's statement, nor are there any hard feelings.
Back in 2022, Trump spoke to the Heritage Foundation and was direct about its role in crafting future policy.
This is a great group, and they're going to lay the groundwork and detail plans for exactly what our movement will do and what your movement will do when the American people give us a colossal mandate to save America, and that's coming. That's coming.
Trump's own policy platform closely resembles many of Project 2025's proposals, too, from cracking down on immigration to blocking gender-affirming healthcare and stopping a woke and weaponized government.
Given the persuasiveness of these ideas, the overlap that exists between Trump's stated priorities and the priorities of the project, that will all sort itself out. It really is the conservative playbook, not just for the next year or two, but hopefully for the next generation.
Don't forget to check us out on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. Do you have show ideas or want to be on the show? Shoot us an email at blackmansroundtable@gmail.com. And please follow us on Facebook.
1,